Another truth at the moment, and the thing that a lot of people are dealing with, and a lot of the big entities, these particular sessions where you meet a lot of people who've got some time and some skin in the game.
Starting this month in Selkirk, they'll start removing everything above, I think it's...
Software players are key to enabling new deployment. A journalist came with a whole load of questions, and I said, do you know what, those questions are so brilliant. The other thing to mention about Olympic 2 is it's still phenomenally successful, particularly in HD, for cable markets. And I think that assuming that everyone's jumped up to APC, even within this country, is a hell of an assumption. And still, Ofcom are saying, can we actually mandate that we can go to SD APC, which simplify things a hell of a lot. And that's just going through. I think Gordon probably knows more about that than I do. That they are really setting the pace in terms of what they can actually deliver to the home. This is just to give you an idea of the main stakeholders, what they're interested in terms of HDR, virtual reality. They're getting onto the more difficult areas. UHD, I think that my opinion is that the consumers get it. And sooner or later, in the next 3-4 years, you're going to go down and it's going to be a difficult decision actually finding an HD set. Most people are buying it, and it's setting the expectation for us to deliver UHD services to replace the HD services. So the buying public gets it. It's whether we as broadcast manufacturers can actually deliver, and specifically for live, and that's a challenge and a test for us. Because you're of a generation that I can talk to where Craig Charles in Red Dwarf shows exactly what the prospects are for virtual reality. And the thing I loved is that I was actually being disparaging for a colleague who made a very unfortunate tweet that made an association of VR going hand in hand with the porn industry. That since he's my American colleague, had me laughing out loud, and I suppose is why I'm viewed as a safe pair of hands to him. But the VR industry, if you were looking around CES, a lot of the private booth demonstrations and justifications of it were going down a distinctly seedy line. On complete blogs, because you're of a generation, and for all of the typical kind of workflow from ingest, layout, graphics, transcoding, encrypting, and delivery, you used to look at those being very, very specific products within their own product functionalities that were defined by interfaces. You know which vendor you'd go for. But basically, now, from beginning to end, perhaps with the exception of monitoring in the middle, most vendors are saying, it's open. We need to grab as much of that footprint as we can to actually deliver a product to actually counteract the kind of price erosion that a lot of the reasons why manufacturers are showing such, sort of complete services, because genuinely we're moving away from the traditional product-based approach to more looking features, software, application, cloud-based services. Being associated with the cloud, because most of that was about how their staff actually dealt with their own personal security, and how they actually facilitated bots, the recruitment of a number of gang machines, how sophisticated a lot of these cyber attacks are, in the fact that they're multi-stage, so they first of all recruit numerous machines, knock out the antivirus, establish comms back there, and often the poor individual who makes the mistake of clicking on the link and actually establishing them to get a foothold is just making a fundamental error in terms of introducing it. But if you want to look at an interesting area, you look at the security area with them. It's really difficult, and I was so pleased when I was told for NAB I couldn't have any live equipment on the booth, because actually I think that all of the metadata parsing can be done, but it is getting frighteningly complex, and there are a lot of issues for 17 DVB to run through, and even for one instance, I'm pleased I proved I did it. I learned a hell of a lot about doing, grading, about passing things on, about the scaling and the rendition on different screens. Some things you don't want to do again, and you particularly don't want to do it again when there aren't any standard on a couple of slides, but I will get on to screen technologies after this slide. I've talked about all of the themes, and basically there are 4 runners and riders for high dynamic range. HDR10, that's if you like your Escort L. It's in everything. You know, it's on your Blu-ray player, it's on your screen. If you buy something that's got HDR on it, it will be HDR10. Dolby Vision, if you went around any of the CES booths, their marketing department, and a lot of them are former Harmonic colleagues who are there. They do a fantastic job of getting Dolby Vision implemented on all of the screens. It's basically a bolt-on to HDR10 to add fidelity onto it. The BBC, in conjunction with NHK, and that's my obvious typo that I spotted down the road, they've worked on hybrid log gamma. It is a 2020 scheme, but it does have that backwards compatibility with that 709 curve. Got to be particularly careful on this backwards compatibility issue, because most broadcasters want one scanner out of them, and if their revenue is driven by HD SDR services, if you make those HD SDR services look rubbish, they don't give a damn about how good the UHD HDR pictures, because you've impacted the fundamental revenue earner. So backwards compatibility is a massive issue. And then you get technical or advanced HDR, which is purporting to be a best of all worlds and can deal with the other 3 standards and actually present it. There's a lot of information, even in those slides, about HDMI compatibility. For those of you who've probably got too much money and going down to Richard Sounds and trying to buy sets, be very, very careful what you buy. You know, take as much and pay attention as much as possible to, if they're showing you HDR content, don't be fooled if they do it on a USB key. Look at what version of HDMI is available, and if the little boy in the shop can't tell you, go and find out. Because I have bought and taken back so many screens in France, Germany, the US, trying to stage these kind of demos. If I tell you that one screen manufacturer has 12 different decoder builds associated with what they're doing, and the level of performance of HDR varies across all of them, you'll see that that is enough to ruin anyone's summer holiday trying to get those kind of demos to work with live screens. Amazingly good job in terms of upscaling, in terms of using auto SDR to HDR techniques. You could say that we're still in the midst of going from SD to HD if you look at regionalised BBC at the moment. But that gives you an idea of where we actually are, that we're not a true HD world now. It is more than true for UHD. They're a frighteningly small proportion of what we'll do, and I would argue that most people who will be purporting to have a UHD channel will essentially be remastered 2K assets presented as 4K material with an occasional pop-up of a Super Bowl or 6 stations or something like that for some time yet, because of the complexity of doing this.
Which they could have done with a UHD set at home and an HD
Correct.
reception.
Correct. So, but frankly, we're very, very close to the end, and I will shut up talking, because I've very nearly hit my added time. What I would say is, here we go. 0 to 50 slides in an hour and a half. You didn't even realise that that much material was going ahead, because I thought somebody would take me off at a tangent. Anyways, on the metadata thing, metadata schemes are very, very difficult to handle in workflows, and I think it's yet to be standardised, really, yet to be proved. There are a lot of difficult things going on there, even for audio description being co-typed with video and data. That is massively difficult within workflows. That you imagine escalating that by 10, different scene types, different descriptions, different capture modes, you realise the size and scope of what Senti and other people have got far more patience resolving those kind of issues than me. You need to handle a wide variety of different display types, going on to your OLED and QLED. Most of what's going on at the moment is grading for a specific screen technology. and we need to have grading that's ubiquitous. In terms of backwards compatibility, that is the key issue. Most of the content is HD, SDR content, and it's as much an issue for legacy content as it is for the existing production infrastructure. Simulcast transmission schemes are not popular, but basically you will not succeed having the best UHD, HDR scanner on a pitch if there is no viable route to go to an HDR, SDR version of it, because you are not representing the vast majority of the paying hunters for that particular service. UHD production needs to be more manageable even within the software domain. You look at anyone who's actually doing UHD production, it's Keith Robertson there at the moment, and frequently involves lots of former coffee trolleys and things like that, with loads of equipment on there, not standardised, not the kind of thing that's standardised at the moment.
And coaxies everywhere.
Yeah, you see, I didn't even say that. You see, that was very good. But the thing is it's not scalable, and it comes from the fact that 4K is predominantly a cinematic format that is yet to get that kind of television production workflow. And I think this last thing is that hand in hand with the introduction of UHD services and the move towards IP and virtualization.